networking is something that is really important, especially for people that are in a professional setting. You know, it's not just about going and back in the day, as they would say, collect people's cards. It's really, to me, about building relationships. So that's why I kind of titled this Tips on Making Long-Lasting Connections. So what is networking? You know, from dictionary.com, it's the action or process of interacting with others to exchange information and develop professional and social contacts. And for me, I kind of define it as building relationships. It's not just about going to conferences or, you know, collecting people's cards or, you know, connecting with a ton of people on social media. It's really about finding people that you can make connections with, that at some point in your life, you might reach out to them for some reason. It might be personally, it might be professionally. Here in our organization, it's a mix of both professional and religious and spiritual. So it's really about connecting with others and building those long-lasting relationships. So of course, there's many different ways to network. In person is a larger one where you're in networking events. Obviously, in this COVID-19 environment, in-person networking is probably not going to happen for a while in the way that many of us might have done before, by going, like I said, going to conferences, going to work events, going to work happy hours. LinkedIn is another good way. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I really recommend, you know, putting something together. It's a really great way to connect with other people in your industry. It's also a good way to reach out if you are at an event or you have met someone. I definitely recommend going in onto LinkedIn, finding them, and sending a request. They allow you to put little notes in to say, "Hey, I met you at this event. Would love to like connect." So definitely encourage social media. I see someone. Okay. Social media is another way. You know, obviously most of us are on some form, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. That is obviously another way to network. Obviously more like the personal side. As you meet people and meet other people's friends, there's ways to connect there. But I also think that people are now using social media also for business purposes. For Facebook and Instagram, people have their own personal business accounts that they use to connect with people, especially in this environment where we are virtual. I know personally, I have my yoga studios, my Pilates studios, all of those are on social media. So that is another way to make connections. Via friends and family. Obviously, if you've gone to a barbecue or if you've gone to a baby shower, there are people that you've met there. That's another way to, you know, when you're sitting down and chatting with someone, finding out what they do, where do they work, what are their hobbies. You never know what you'll find and who you connect with and who you might actually make a relationship with through that. Virtually, even now, like right now, we're on this virtual meeting, but there are people here that do different things. So it's just another way to make connections. And finally, at work, before we were all mostly working from home, you know, there's ways to network within your own team members, within your own departments, across departments. I happen to work in a legal department, but I also network with people that are in compliance, because if I have an issue where I need to loop someone in from a different group, having that relationship, you know, and having that knowledge, it makes it easier to get things done. So I feel like we're constantly networking in ways and building those relationships each and every day. So we have some tips, and obviously this first tip mainly relates to pre-COVID. If you were going to like a specific networking event for an affinity group or something related to your job, like your industry, they recommend from entrepreneur.com to arrive early. You know, sometimes people kind of want to show up late because they, you know, are a little bit nervous or awkward, but it's really important to kind of get there, get a sense of like the lay of the land, you know, and really just kind of jump in to get to know people. Ask easy questions. You know, most people at networking events, don't want to be, asked what their IQ is, or, things that are just a little bit above and beyond. So kind of just stick with, hey, what do you do? Where do you work? Where do you live? Just things that you can kind of get to know people, start on that more informal level. Ditch the sales pitch. And, a lot of times people go to networking events with goals in mind, but you also don't want to come across to used car salesman. If you have a business, you don't want to go in there saying, yeah, I have this business and this is what I do and this is what I sell, because it can turn people off. They might take it the wrong way. I think you can lead with what you do, but you don't have to use it as a sledgehammer. When I was in private practice, they were constantly encouraging young attorneys to, try to do business development, but I wouldn't go to these events and the first thing and say, I'm a litigator at a firm and I can help you if you get sued. No one would react to that quite well. But then eventually you can kind of, put that in there, what do you do, and how it relates, but just making sure it's not coming across to used car salesmen. Share your passion. What do you enjoy? What do you do outside of work? That's another way to make connections. Are you on a board? Do you volunteer? What church do you go to? Just things like that, because that also builds relationships and people kind of get to know who you are. Also, smile. I think sometimes we're in these when we're in these kind of networking things, you can get really serious, and I think sometimes a smile does kind of break some of that awkwardness and uncomfortability. Don't hijack the conversation. I happen to be an extrovert and I can talk and talk and talk, but it's really important to listen when you're meeting people and networking, because if you take the time to listen, you're actually hearing what someone's saying. You'll hear that they're passionate about, homelessness, or they're passionate about their church, or they're passionate about their kids, playing softball or little league. So really, if you're in these kinds of situations, give people a chance to talk, even if you are a talker. And if you're an introvert, make sure you're sharing and speak up on the things that are passionate to you, so that the other person can know what is important to you as well. And the final tip is, remember the follow-up. In some instances, it might be an email. For some people, it might be going on LinkedIn and finding someone, but make sure you reach out appropriately. Probably a phone call might be too much, but in this day and age, an email saying, hey, it was great meeting you at the such and such event. I look forward to meeting you at another event, or, just something that is a touch base, just kind of remind someone that they met you, what you guys talked about, and you can kind of start that initial building block on building a relationship. So some networking mistakes, and I've been one to have done some of these things. Prior to working at TD, I was at a law firm in Philadelphia, and I was a younger associate. And during the interview process, when I was still in law school, we had a networking event after interviews. So just think, after interviewing with 4 attorneys, trying to get a job for the summer, then they make you sit through an hour-long cocktail reception with all these people that you don't know. And I just remember being so stressed out, trying to figure out, how do I connect with these people? How do I make a lasting impression? So some of the things that I found, and for my own personals, don't be too informal. Try to keep things professional. You obviously don't want to come across as rigid or stiff, but you also don't want to get too personal too quickly. In some instances, if it's a happy hour and there is some, drinking, drink Sprite, drink soda water. It might not make sense to, drink too much, because then things might get too informal too fast. Not too much follow-up. If you reach out to someone and you don't hear back from them, it might make sense to move on. You just don't want to continue to email someone, especially if they're an executive or a higher up or someone that's very busy. You just don't want to come across as I don't want to say harassing, but a little bit too much. So just be mindful of the follow-up and the touch points. And if they're not responsive, then it probably makes sense to move on. Every interaction at a networking event or a networking is not going to lead to a connection, and that's okay. You try, you connect, you engage, but if it doesn't lead to something, it's okay to move on. kind of like that used car salesman, don't oversell yourself. If you are, not a marketing executive, then don't present yourself as that. If you are not the CEO of your small business, don't say that. If your business hasn't, if you're still working on it, don't say that we're going to launch, tomorrow, when you're still working through a lot of the, initial basics of like what's going on. Kind of talked earlier about not dominating the conversation, be a listener, and then also don't ask for a job. Like if you make a connection with someone, and you meet them and it's great, then don't just say, hey, I'm looking for a job, because then it comes across as disingenuous, that they're going to think, oh, you were just talking to me because I happen to work at X company, and you're trying to get like your foot in like the door. So just kind of be mindful of your ask. And as we all know, we are really in the midst of a health crisis and a pandemic where we have to be safe. We're not engaging in large groups, and so be creative, come up with ways to connect via technology, letters, email, or in person safely. Like if you are able to go to, the park events that Freedom Church is going to be having, like great, if you have certain people in like your life that you can connect with safely, eating outdoors, to meet with a mentor for lunch, great, but just try to be like creative. Technology is there. We have FaceTime, we have Zoom, we have Meet, I think it's Google Meet. There's many different ways to stay connected with people right now. And then obviously as the health crisis works its way out, I'm sure we'll go back to some sort of larger networking events, larger, maybe go back to the office. But in like the time being, just be creative. I know for me, I love to send birthday cards. So that's my way to touch point with people that are in like my network. So I'll shoot people a birthday card, or I'll shoot someone an email just saying, hey, what's up? Or if I see something in the news that relates to their industry, I'll shoot them a link like, oh, did you see this? This is happening, X, Y, and Z. So there are definitely ways to, stay on people's like radars. Set goals. I know for me personally, before the pandemic, I had hoped to reconnect with some of the people that I work with in the city on a monthly basis. That's not happening the way that I like want to, but I have reconnected with some of my old coworkers. I've had a couple Zoom calls. So there are just ways to, kind of sit down and figure out, you have these network of people, how do you want to stay engaged with them, and just kind of set some goals. That also comes in with be consistent, making sure you're keeping on top of things, whether it's checking in on your LinkedIn, regularly, reaching out to people that you're connected with just to like say hello, but make sure it's something that you're doing on a regular basis. Since we have some free time with like the pandemic, kind of assess your network. Who do you know personally and like professionally? Like who haven't you talked to in a bit that you wish you kind of want to just touch base with, an old boss, an old supervisor, an old assistant. There are ways to just kind of look to see, who you haven't talked with and who you want to get reconnected with. And I would just say stay positive and stay focused. So the end result is really to build relationships with people that you can turn to when you need assistance, whether it's within the job search, professional development, personal advice. I call it the kitchen cabinet. People that are in your life that you go to when you are in need of assistance, and people that you trust, and people that know you well and who will give you sound advice, good, bad, or indifferent. If you're looking to make a career change, you should have a couple people that you can reach out to and say, hey, this is where I am. This is what I'm thinking. Can you provide me with some guidance? So it's really important to make sure that you have people in your life that you can reach out to within your network, and that might run professionally and personally. And that also falls into my last bullet about mentors, sponsors, and champions. Mentors are people that you go to for advice. You follow up with them, you reach out to them. They're people that you rely on just to kind of help with like guidance. But sponsors and champions are people that are in, at least for your career, and it can also be personally, but generally for your career, are folks that when you're not in the room are speaking up for you and advocating for you and saying, I know so-and-so is interested in this, job. They should be taking on this new position, or we have a new opportunity and we think so-and-so should be the right person. So you want to make sure that you're building relationships and have people in your networks that are going to sponsor you and champion for you when you're not in the room, whether it's professionally or, personally. So just making sure that you're building those kinds of relationships. Okay, so now we are going to the group exercise, but I feel like since we're one big group, we'll probably not break up into individual sessions, but I think we can all together kind of go through, some of these questions, because I think that helps when you're kind of talking, you kind of get to know people a little bit more, and can learn and grow.
Yeah, I had a question. It was very enjoyable to hear everyone's answers, how we did it. And I didn't understand how you connected it at the end, like, oh, this is going to be valuable, more about this person in the future. So that was really neat. But I was just trying to think, like, how would you ask someone their favorite movie, like, because we're kind of friends, right? So is that okay? Like at a networking. I would love to talk about that. I don't know.
I think you have to know like your audience,
Okay.
You're with someone and, you guys are talking about, different topics. Because obviously there's some topics you want to avoid that are controversial, but if you're in a conversation and, you're kind of just talking to someone, sometimes the travels, and it might not be their favorite movie, maybe it's the last movie you saw, as a way to, build that connection and, talk, because that's kind of what networking is. It's like, having discussions, getting to know people. And sometimes those types of questions elicit what people care about, right? And what they like to do. So if someone's into dramas and about dramas, or someone into comedies, and you can kind of take that information and, use it as you're trying to get to know them. So obviously,
Mm-hmm.
Audience, and if you're talking to an executive at your company, you might not want to ask them about like movie, but you might want to ask them what they did with their last family vacation, and that gives them a chance to talk about their family and their kids and what they do, and if they go camping versus going to Europe versus, going to Maui.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a sense of a little bit more about like who they are.
Got it. That's cool. Yeah, I guess there are a lot of chances to do that. Like after a weekend or something, you can often ask, how was your weekend, and hear what they are into. So I guess there are natural ways to do it that aren't so, that fit the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. I really thought it was interesting when you said, not just having mentors, but having sponsors and champions. How do you recommend that we build those networks?
So I will tell you personally what I did at TD. So one of my mentors became a sponsor by me like building a relationship with him. And since he was hired about a year and a half before I has been promoted way up the chain. He's now global head of litigation. So before he was head of litigation for US, and since then he's like global head. So over the years, I've made sure that I stay connected with him. He had reached out to me when his daughter was starting her college search. She was interested in the college that I went to, so she came to the office, and I talked to her about my experience. She ended up at a different school, but I could have easily been like, no, or I don't know. But I was like, of course I'll answer questions. So then that gave me a foot into asking about his daughter. How's she doing at school? What's going on? She's now since graduated. She's going on to vet school. So you kind of take those opportunities to kind of build like the relationship, and he got to know me better, and was able to recommend me for a leadership program that I immensely enjoyed, and I grew a lot. But had I not built that relationship beforehand, like getting to know him, talking to him, talking about asking him questions of like what's going on litigation wise, I'd be like, oh, what big cases are happening, what, just kind of, finding out what's going on with like what's on his plate. I also volunteered to help out when he was leading our diversity and inclusion month. I, volunteered. So just kind of building those kinds of relationships, staying on those radar so that they get to know you, so that when those opportunities come up, you're top of mind. But obviously doing it authentically, like, right, with a sense of not like, oh, I'm just doing this because I want X. It's just doing it because you want to build a relationship.
I was gonna say that something similar happened to me, and it was that I got involved to be volunteering on an education program, and the person that I was part of, he's actually an architect and lead designer in an architecture office, but he's involved with the Center for Architecture and Design. And we always volunteer all the time, and we build a relationship, even though he's also a neighbor. He lives like a couple of minutes away from my house, so he even carpool or when we were going to an event or something. And he's also mentoring me, but at some point he said, hey, Elizabeth, at the center, we're looking for board members, and I actually recommended you because I know you're interested on this, and I know that you like this, and they're looking for a person like that. So from there, he actually recommended me for the center. I got an interview, and I'm now part of the board. But it was just because that way, like, we started volunteering together, and then from there, we just continued building our relationship.
That's awesome, Elizabeth. Yeah, I mean, and that's what it's about. It's like, that's why when people say like networking, it's just, it's just not about working the room. It's really about building relationships. And if at the end of the day, you do a networking event and you only make a connection with one person, but it's a meaningful connection and it leads to something, it's better than running around the room, talking to 25 people and you end up leaving and there's no follow-up, right? Because you just ended up spending more time worrying about, oh, I need to meet 15 or 16 people versus spending time and, targeting someone that you want to meet, or just happening to be standing next to someone and you end up bonding with them and making that like connection. So yeah, you got, and obviously you have to read the room. You might not get the CEO time for, 15, 20 minutes, someone that's a peer that you end up connecting with and talking to, finding out what they like do, and they might be a resource later on when you're looking for a job, right? So it's about building a relationship, or they might recommend you for a board seat.
Yeah, and just speaking from experience, like sometimes, people go to networking event with the mindset of, trying to get something, from the people there. But I found that a lot of times when I go to networking event, I can immediately know who is there, try to, get information or get favor out of people, because those people always, look around the room when they're talking to you, they're not looking at you, they're just scouting like, oh, who is the next person I can go to, and you can immediately pick up, those hints, right? It's like, oh, okay, this person is not really here to to build a relationship. So I think if you, or if we could be the person that says, hey, I'm here to want to know you, and then also if the opportunity comes, we might actually be able to offer favor or help to someone, that will really go a long way to for that person to remember you, and then have the relationship go from there.
Awesome. Totally.
So that was really interesting. Everything you guys just said, Jeffrey. Like when you said, would you suggest you can actually say? I think last thing you said, you can be the one to offer some help in the future. So there's like, you can say that in a phrase. Is there a phrase that you could say when you've just met someone?
Usually those things happen naturally. So let's say if you're talking to the person and then the person says, oh, maybe they're looking for a job and then in certain industry.
I see.
And if you have connection, or if you know someone that might be
got it.
You can just offer and say, hey, I know so and so, maybe you can connect them, right? So it's just kind of natural ways to offer help, to offer things that someone needs. and
Right.
and you never know, right? Maybe at that moment they cannot help you with anything, but maybe later on as the relationship grows, you guys can help each other.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thanks.
As I just want to add, as being a Christian, networking is something that God always uses. Divine appointments. You'll never know. Like, I don't think I will be where I am today if it weren't for God, using the people that He has connected in my life, mentors, role models, friends, open door. God uses open doors and the relationships that God has put in my life. And so the more we step out in faith in networking, I believe God can use that in so many ways and to bring, open doors and favor in our lives. I don't think nothing is a coincidence with God. And so every networking opportunity is something that God can use to fulfill our calling and purpose.